Hello and welcome back. As we continue our Hello and welcome back to part 2 of Hello and welcome back to our continuing series of a still life right here inside of 3D Studio Max. I'm your instructor, Domiko L. Cunningham, and let's get back where we kind of left off. So in the last video, we talked about a little bit of the overall interface of Max and how we can manipulate viewports and kind of what these panels are inside of here and being able to lay some of this stuff out. So now that we have a basic understanding of interface, and if you need a refresher on any of those things, then make sure that you go back to that first video and go back through it again. But here inside of this video, let's talk about some fundamental things. Now, one of the things we're going to be creating a still life, and I'll show you a picture of something that we're going to be creating. Not quite the same thing, but sort of this style. So I'm going to bring this up really quick. So all of these still lifes inside of on Google that we found, they're all still lifes that were most of them were created inside of a 3D program. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a couple of elements from some of these and we're going to incorporate them into a brand new still life of our own. Some of the things that I would love to be able to cover, and we will cover in this series, is how to build something like this like cylindrical form, like this wine glass, this flute, this pitcher. These things are things that are very easily constructed inside of Max or inside of any 3D program. And then also we're going to be looking at the texturing of these items. So you can see that we have like this orange here, so I probably want to do a fruit. The easiest thing to do is going to be like an orange or something like this. This is a really easy fruit to do. So we're going to do like an orange, be able to do these leaves for it, and then do some of these like these pitchers and wine glasses. Really simple shapes to pull off. Realistically, the thing that brings most of these shapes together is the fact that the texture and the lighting are what really push these objects. Because when you look at them on their own merit, they're actually very simplistic objects. You know, they're basic geometric shapes. And that's the one thing that I stress to new 3D artists as they're trying to create their items in 3 dimensions is think about the basic, simple geometric shape of the form that you're trying to build. Sometimes you look at, as a 3D artist, you'll look at things, or as a new 3D artist, you'll look at items and you'll say, that's really complicated. I could never put that together. There's so many pieces, it's so intricate, I don't know how somebody did it in the first place, but there's no way that I could do that. The first thing that I tell students that have that mindset is, first of all, they're actually approaching the situation in the wrong way. Because anything that we look at inside of our world is realistically made up of some type of geometric, simplistic, some kind of simple geometric shape, realistically. So if we look at a scene like this, we can see we got a computer in here, we got a Vita, we've got a Rubik's Cube and a hard drive and an iPhone. But if you look at this and you take away all the details on this, this is nothing more than a rectangle. This is a rounded rectangle. This is also a beveled edge rectangle. Rectangle, rectangle, rectangle. All the keys are little rectangles or squares, but simple shapes. Same thing with this. I've got cylinders, I've got a box with an extruded edge that goes into a cylinder. So realistically, what I'm looking at are a lot of simple, primitive shapes. The thing that makes them stand out is the rendering. The way that it looks. You can see right here, this is still made up of very simple shapes like cylinders, circles, 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 rectangles. The thing that makes this look very dynamic and very striking is the fact that the shading is actually there. So looking at some of these, we can kind of get an idea of some of the stuff that we want to try to create. And it's always good to do this when you first start. which is to gather some reference images. So I'm going to keep this guy as a reference. I like that. I'm going to keep this as a reference. I'm really digging on that. And I like these oranges. I'm going to keep this as a reference image. And I think that's all I want to take for the most part. I might use this for a reference too. I kind of like the lighting on this. I like the wine jug, and we might build a wine jug like this too, or a wine barrel rather. So I like a lot of the things that we have. So those are what I'm going to use as my kind of my inspirations for what I'm going to do. So I can see that, this person did wine and cheese, and this is a really good render of this as well. One of the things that's kind of a little bit light is there's not a lot of shadow in this. It's a very clean palette for the look of the 3D, and it looks like this guy did a lot of the ones that we actually like and we picked up on. It looks like he's done quite a few still lives setups, and you can see where his rendering and technique have gotten better. Or if this is the same person, I think it might be a blog. Either way, we've got some really great reference images to kind of look back at, and we're not going to necessarily copy them, but we are going to look at them for inspiration for what we're going to do. Now, some of them I might just actually do what I see, but for most of them we're going to, try to just use them for inspiration, right? So, let's start with a wine glass. And I'm going to go through one of the simplest ways to build an item inside of Max, and that's with either a line or a basic primitive, like a box or a sphere or a cylinder or something of that nature. What we're going to start out using, though, we're going to start out with actually using just a line, and I'll show you how. This is called spline modeling. So I'm going to go back to my create panel, and I'm going to go over here to shapes, and I'm going to go get a line. And I've got my line tool, and you can tell drawing inside of this little itty bitty box is kind of not where I really want to be doing this. It's all going in this little box. So what I want to do is I want to maximize this viewport. Now, if you were in Maya, you would hit the space bar and let go of space bar, and it would maximize your viewport. But remember, we're not inside of Maya, we're inside of Max. So inside of Max, all you have to do is hit Alt and W. Alt plus W will make your viewport expand, and then Alt plus W will make it go back to your quad menu. Now, it's really easy. All you have to do is just make sure whichever viewport you want to expand that you've clicked in it, and then hit Alt W, and then hit Alt W to unmaximize it. You can click over here, Alt W, and then unmaximize it. Really cool little trick. So I'm going to go back to my front view, and I can see that I have this axis on my z-axis straight up and down, and then my y-axis is coming back, is right in front of me, and then my x-axis is left and right. Now not every, but most 3D programs, the up axis is usually y, but for whatever reason inside of Max, the up axis is z. Now you could change that if you wanted to, but it's not that big of a deal. Realistically, it's really not that big of a deal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my line tool, and I'm going to click, I'm going to left click, and I'm going to left click again, somewhere right about here, and then I'm going to left click right here, and then take this down, click, 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 and click, click, and right to the center, click. And then to finish making this line, I'm going to right click so that I deactivate that line, but it stopped me from drawing this line. But if you look over here in your command panel, you'll notice that the line is still active. So you want to right click it one more time, and that will deactivate the line, so you won't keep drawing lines. Because if you just do this, if you just come in here and do line, and then you right click to stop drawing, the next time you click, you'll start making a brand new line, and you have to right click again. So make sure you double right click, or you can hit Q. But remember, we talked about if you hit Q, it's going to keep cycling through your selection methods. So just be aware of that. All right. So I've made my line. So now that I have a line, I need to modify this line because it's not completely smooth everywhere. It's kind of a little jaggedy right in here, and if we remember what our vase or our little holder looked like, we're making this guy right here, and this has like a smooth curve to this that goes down, and ours is kind of like and so it's not really following what we want it to be. So what I want to do, I want to modify this. I'm going to go to my modify panel. So in my modify panel, you can see when I click on this that I get line 01. And this is the name of this line. I'm going to change the name of this line to wine underscore glass, so I know what it is and not just the line 01 and line 02 and all these other things. So I know what that is. I have some type of definition of what this line actually is now. And if I look down here in my modify panel, I can see there is a line. If I click on the little plus box right here, it shows me that there are sub-objects of this line. So this line is the overall object. And then there are sub-objects. There are vertexes, and that's what these are. These are vertices, these little dots. Or I can actually mess with the segment, and the segment is like a line segment. So you're starting to see how those geometry classes start to come back around and make more sense for 3D. And then the spline itself. And then the spline is the overall object, the whole and overall object. Now I can quickly get to these sub-objects by using my number keys on the keyboard. The 1 key takes me back to vertex mode. The 2 key takes me to segment mode. The 3 key will take me into spline mode. And then the 6 key will actually bring me back up to the top if I were using another type of polygon. And there we go. So I'm going to go in here and go to vertex mode. So in my vertex mode, and I'm gonna expand my command panel. So right here at the edge of my viewport, I'm going to click and drag over just one. And you'll see I can see all of these other panels that were kind of hidden before. And I could still see them even if there was collapse like this. You just have to scroll down here, and I don't like scrolling like that. So I have enough screen space where I can just bring this over so that I can see all my panels at once, and I like that a lot better. So what I'm going to do is I've got my vertex in here. I'm going to go to vertex mode. I'm going to grab this vertex right here. And currently right now, this vertex is set to be a linear vertex. I'm going to change that. So I selected it, I left mouse click and drag over it, and then I'm going to right mouse click on it. And these are my quad menu. This is my quad menu. So in the top left corner of my quad menu underneath Tools 1, you'll see that this current vertex is set to corner. I'm going to set this vertex to smooth. And look what happened. When I set it to smooth, it actually smooths out the interpolation from this point to this point to this point. So this becomes a smooth tangent between these two corresponding vertices in space. Now, this is where I need to make some changes. So, to be able to move this around, because you can see I have a Y and an X red arrow or red line in here. So it's showing me that I should be able to move this, but I don't have any handles to be able to move it with. Well, inside of Max, if you press the W key on your keyboard, that gives you your move tool or your translate and move tool. So with that, you can see that I can move this around. Now, if I grab it by just one axis, you see I can only move it in the one direction that I selected. If I grabbed Y, it would only move this way. If I grab X, it only move this way. But now, in between these two, there's this little line right here. If I come here and grab that line, I can move in both directions at the same exact time. So I can round that out, So I'm going to come in here, let's zoom down, I'm going to select this, right click on it, and I'm going to say I want to make that smooth. Let's move this out, and we'll make that one smooth as well. And let's get this kind of how we want it, right about here. Now this one here, I'm going to right click on this one, and I want to say that I want to make this a Bezier. And when I make this a Bezier, you see it gives me these two handles, these two little handles right there. Now if I come in here and grab this handle, because I want to bump that up, I want to make it like slide down and then flop up kind of really quick, and I'm going to change this one right here to a Bezier as well. Yeah. So this way I give a little bit more profile. Now you see if I move this around the way that it is, it's still a corner and it looks really hard and angular. So I'm going to right click on this, and once again I'll make this one smooth so that I can get a smooth blend between, interpolation between these points. I'm going to pull this up like right about here. And I think I'm liking what I see so far. Alright, so I kind of like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to click on line. That takes me to the top level. I am now currently at the top level of my object. So what I want to do and what I need to do before I do this is I need to adjust my pivot point. So I'm going to come in here to my hierarchy panel and I'm going to say affect pivot only. I'm going to grab that pivot point and bring it to the center of my grid, and I'm going to put it right there on the center line, that center black line on my grid. If I wanted to, I could pull it up to meet where it meets right here, so it's more like right about there, and then turn off my affect pivot. Now the reason why I did that will make more sense in just 1 second. So I'm going to come in here and unmaximize this, and let's go into perspective and look at it. And you can see in perspective it is just a line. It's a two-dimensional shape, has no form or volume to it. It is just a two-dimensional shape. So what I'm going to do, once again, I'm going to go back into my modify panel, and I'm going to use one of my modifiers. Because you can see before, remember when I clicked on this before and I had nothing in my scene, there were no modifiers to use. But now there's tons of modifiers. One of the modifiers that I want to use, it is an object space modifier. So I'm modifying the object space, and the modifier that I want to use is called lathe. So L-A-T-H-E, lathe. When I click on that, boop, you can see that it gives me this really cool shape and this wine glass looking doohickey, which works out really, really well. Now I'm going to go back in here to my front view and actually look at this. You'll notice that when I click on my vertex and I click on vertex, you'll see the lathe is still there, but everything else goes away. Like all the stuff goes away. Well, if I want to see the finished result and see what I'm tweaking currently, like right now I'd be tweaking this. So if I move this and then I go back up here to lathe, you'll see it changes my wine glass. So what I want to do is I want to go in here to vertex mode, and you'll see right here, right beside this pin stack, there is a show end result toggle. I'm going to click that toggle, and you'll see it shows me an orange line, which shows me that I'm at the editing level. So as I move this around, this is really cool. As I start to move this thing around, you can see that I can change the form of this like relatively quickly and be able to get this to look more like I wanted it to from the beginning. So I'll grab both of these and maybe drag these in just a tad and go back here to my lathe, and I'm going to hit Alt W, and let's come back in here once again and let's look at this. Now when I hit Alt W and look at this, I'm going to zoom extend. So when I look at this, you can see that it isn't quite smooth as it could be. So what I need to do, if you look in here on my lathe, there's some parameters for my lathe. I can set the segments. So if I turn segments down, you'll see it's almost like a triangle. If I start turning these guys up, there's 4, there's 6 segments, 8, and right around, I'm thinking it's about 25 segments. It should look pretty round. So at 25 segments, it's actually pretty round. And that's really it. I have made myself a wine glass. So I've made the glass. Only thing I need to do now is actually texture this. But before I start texturing anything, I'm going to complete just all of my objects, and then we'll go through and construct them all. Right? So my other objects, I'm gonna go ahead and create my other glass and goblet, and then I'm going to put together my orange. But I've shown you guys how to do the lathe. So lathe is really the main part about this whole process. It's lathing. So by having that operation of doing lathe, if I go back down to my vertex mode inside of my lathe, you can see that I can actually see the baseline of this and be able to easily manipulate all these items and the look of my piece. So I hope you've enjoyed using and taking a look at lathe. In our next video, I'll actually start to have most of my pieces. So I'm going to go ahead and just make a lot of my objects, and I'm going to make them the exact same way. I'm going to do a candlestick, and I'm going to do another type of goblet, and then I'm going to do a plate, and I'm going to do them all with the same technique. So when we get back, we'll look at how we can, do this same technique with other shapes and how that's going to come together, and we'll see you in the next video.